Hello and welcome to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines, our Thursday edition. Florida State officially put the bow on fall camp today, really 2 days ago, but they will go into their mock game scrimmage tomorrow as they get ready for Georgia Tech. And since Georgia Tech is first on the schedule, we decided we would have Kelly Quinlan from JacketsOnLine, the Georgia Tech rival site, join us today and start talking about the football game and start the football practice. Kelly, how's everything in Atlanta?
It's good. It's been so weird having this extra week. Like before everyone else started, I feel like we're all out of sync with the rest of college football.
Yeah, have you ever? I was asking our guys when we started our first Seminole Sidelines in July. I've been around football my whole life, outside of my father coaching in the USFL when I was a kid, and me being in a spring indoor football league as football operations. I've never been at a football practice in July for a fall season. Have you ever been to a football practice in July?
No, I mean I can't remember starting before maybe August 3rd most of the time.
Yeah.
It's been very strange. I mean, it started a week. School starts early up here in Atlanta, and we still started a week and a half before they did. I was very confused because we went to the ACC kickoff and then turned around and had practice 2 days later or whatever it was.
Yeah, our guys came. Kurt and Bob went up for us. I know you saw them up there, and I think they drove. Mike spoke on, I guess, Monday. They drove back on Tuesday, and practice started on Wednesday. So yeah, it was a really. It's been really quick, and I can't believe how quick 3 weeks of practice have gone by, and we're now 9 days out from the start of college football season. But listen, it's been a long camp for both teams, but there's a lot of momentum around the Georgia Tech football program in Brent Key's second year. We did a summer scouting report on Georgia Tech, and the way I kind of look at it when I go into my research, the question I have coming out: do I feel better about Florida State's chances or worse about Florida State's chances, or do I feel like this Georgia Tech team is better than I thought they would be before I started my research? And so, however you want to term it, I came away very impressed with obviously the season they had last year and Brent Key's first full year. Like I said, there's a lot of buzz about Georgia Tech heading into this year, pun intended. They've got some good players offensively back, some question marks on defense, and that's why we got you here to kind of answer some questions. And my first question, really, obviously, Brent Key is a former Georgia Tech player, former offensive lineman at Georgia Tech, and obviously he's been there as an assistant, I think, multiple times in his career. I think he was with O'Leary possibly early in his career. Could be wrong about that. It might have been with Paul Johnson, but I thought he was there at some point. I may be wrong. But what is the biggest difference in the Georgia Tech program since Brent Key took over for Jeff Collins, now that Brent is going into his second year? Because, listen, they're doing – obviously, if you read the preseason magazines, they're as high as 42nd nationally in one of the polls that ranks them 1 to 130. A lot of talk about Haynes King, Jamal Haynes. They've got some huge momentum on the recruiting trail, which we'll talk a little bit about as we wrap this thing up. But what is Brent Key brought to this program that's building this momentum, I guess would be the best way to put it?
You are correct. Brent GA'd for O'Leary's last season at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
I had to think about the timeline of all that in my head.
I did too.
And then he was at UCF with him. That was what confused me because I remember he GA'd for him at UCF too.
And they're both black and gold, blue and gold.
Yeah. So it's been interesting watching this program. Brent's been a guy that he knows Georgia Tech inside and out, right? He knows everything about both being a player. He was a starting offensive lineman for 4 years during his 5 seasons there. And then also being a coach, being an assistant coach, and then now being a head coach and knowing how to operate the system and how things work and how the kids that fit his program. And the biggest thing for Brent has been trying to build a culture back. You guys are obviously familiar with that coming off of the Willie Taggart era at Florida State and sort of the cultural poison piece of it. And then obviously I think there was some stuff with Jimbo too at the end of his run. But when you have that sort of cultural issue, I guess, within your program, you kind of have to start from scratch. And that was sort of his goal, was to bring in like the right kind of kids that fit what he's doing, and then trying to expand on that. And the biggest thing is to kind of make Georgia Tech cool, which it hasn't been really since probably he was playing here, in terms of just nationally being kind of not a secondary thought when you think of ACC teams, right? And
Yep.
Even with Paul Johnson, when they're successful, I think people kind of pointed at that as a gimmick, even though it wasn't, and kind of naysayed what he was doing. But I think Brent has a full investment from the school, from the alumni base, and all that, and I think that's kind of changed the tenor of things. They're not. I remember one point, they lost out on multiple assistant coaches when Paul Johnson was here over, you know, 75K, 100K, things like that. That doesn't happen now. Like, they're able to retain Buster Faulkner as offensive coordinator despite people going after him. They're able to go hire Tyler Santucci, who was a really good defensive coordinator at Duke. Like, they went out and they're spending money on staff. They're investing in NIL. They're investing in fixing the stadium up to make it nicer, building new facilities. They tore down the student athletic center. You'll see that probably when anyone sees them play their first game. There's like a big hole at the end of the corner of
Yeah.
one of the stadium is where the Edge building was. They're building a new state-of-the-art building there. Like, all these things are kind of going on. They're investing into the product for the first time in a while, outwardly at least. And I think Brent has figured sort of the thing out. He went and found a really interesting offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner, who was on the bench at UGA, helped mentor Stetson Bennett, and like was kind of this guy that had fallen out of favor as an OC and basically G5 schools, and then rehabilitated himself at UGA, and then Tyler Santucci's a Mike Elko guy, and really talented defensive mind. They have a great staff. Jess Simpson, the D-line coach, has really transformed things up front for them. Defensively, I think they're going to look night and day difference. The big question is, can they build upon what they did offensively in the second half of the season? Because they have everyone back except for the starting right guard, who they have a guy who should be technically better than the previous guy, and Keelan Rutledge. And then
And
the
that's
two
the
tight
kid they
ends.
brought up from Middle Tennessee, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Big Red, as they call him, he was all what are they, Conference USA or whatever, Middle
I
Tennessee.
believe they were CUSA. I believe they are. Yeah. Well,
So
I
he
knew
was
I should have
all.
asked Stockstill about him. I knew I should have done that.
So yeah, he's like their starting right guard. Their entire offensive line's back other than that. And then defensively, they went out and got some guys. Like, they're different up front. They got Jordan Vandenberg from Penn State to be their third defensive tackle. Is really talented. They brought in Romello Height from USC, who's made a huge difference for them. And then the guy they were missing last year, Sylvain Yonagin, who's their best defensive end a year ago. He played 27 snaps in the Louisville game, tore his knee, and then was out for the year.
And that was a season opener for you guys last year, right? Was
Yeah,
Louisville?
in the Benz.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's back and healthy. They're probably 8 deep on the defensive line right now with guys who have college experience. Most of them having starting experience.
Yep.
So that's very different, and so that makes your defense look better, right? Like, even if you're not significantly better at linebacker or safety or corner or whatever, but they've improved in corner and other spots too.
Yeah, they brought in Lightsey from Georgia, right, as a defensive, as a linebacker.
Yep.
So I think you got him projected as second team heading into the season. Now, do you that was the kind of the Achilles heel for Georgia Tech last year, was the defense. If you look at where they ranked nationally, it wasn't that great.
It was bad.
Yeah,
it was bad.
It
most
was
of the time.
like 112th, I think, is what they finished total. Maybe
Yeah.
it might have been worse than that. How much between bringing in Tyler Santucci, and I think he brought in his own guys, right? I'm not saying they all came from Duke.
They kept one guy who was the special teams coordinator, but is now like coaching corners. But everyone else was a new hire.
So how do you think they hit on the portal? And obviously, when you come off a bad year, and you're a lot of the questions are your first teamers going to be better than they were a year ago? And then do you have depth? So you think, at least across the front four, they've got pretty good depth going into this season.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at it, they have Their three of their four top defensive tackles are back from last year. Who that was actually a productive group: Zeke Biggers, Horace Lockett, and Mekhi Scott. Mekhi Scott can play end as well for them. He started pretty much every game. Those three. They brought in Thomas Gore from Miami,
Yep.
Vandenberg, who I mentioned, and then Jason Moore transferred to Temple and then transferred back. He's there. So those guys have all played inside. They have Sylvain. They have Josh Robinson, who played a lot last year back. They've both improved with Jess Simpson and Kyle Pope coaching them up. And they have Romello Height and Kevin Harris back at the rush spots. In the portal, the biggest addition probably outside of the defensive line has been Warren Burrell, the
The
corner they picked
corner.
up from
Yep.
Tennessee. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like their boundary corner. He looks great. Just plays great football. Good leader. They have both their starting safeties back. They lost their nickel. The guy behind him, Omar Daniels, might start, or they might start Rodney Shelley, who played, or they might start Saeed Gibbs, who's a kid they picked up from Rhode Island in the portal. They got three options there. The other corner is probably their best cover corner, Amari Harvey, who was
Tallahassee boy.
yeah, he was exceptional in the second half of last year. He helped win the UCF bowl game. He was a great cover corner for them down the stretch, and kind of that guy who can take somebody one on one, has the right attitude about it. They got four corners they feel really good about, with Shelley, who played and started some last year, and then a kid named Zachary Toby, who they added from Illinois in the portal. Linebackers, they have Kyle Eford back, who started most games last year.
Yeah, he was
And
the
then,
leading tackler, right?
yeah, he's like a big box Mike linebacker type.
Okay.
And then Trent Tatum, he's always been kind of up and down. When he in the second half of last year, he kind of got it together a little bit more, and he's really talented. He just has not been consistent. They've really worked with him on that, and they added EJ Lightsey, who you mentioned, and Jackson Hamilton from Louisville,
Yep.
and then Tajay Butler's a really talented freshman who I think will play some. This is kind of a weak side backer guy. Who I loved. I saw him in New Orleans at one of our rivals camps, and when he was like a sophomore in high school, he won the New Orleans camp like MVP linebacker. And he was like a little bit smaller than the guys like LSU recruits and A&M. And that's how he ended up at Georgia Tech. The Ricky Brumfeld, the guy I mentioned, the special
Yep.
teams coordinator, he's tied into the boot and was able to get that kid out of there.
Well, listen, it's hard. It's hard to get good football players out of the boot if LSU wants them, even Mississippi State or Ole Miss, and even the schools out in Texas. And Florida State's had some pretty good success. They've got two coaches that had experience either in high school or college in Louisiana, and they've FSU's had some good success there as well. All right, so we got a question from one of our viewers. In many of the metrics, and we talked about this little, Georgia Tech was among the worst P4 teams against the run. How much improvement realistically you're expecting this year? Top 75, which would be 40% improvement. And then he asked specifically about the linebacking core, which you talked about a little bit. So, I guess he wants to say it. Guess what he's asking, is this a defense that has a chance to move up into maybe the top half of the defenses in the country?
So I'm surprised the first question's not about Josh Petty, first of all. And secondly, I thought that was where the FSU fans would go out the gate.
They may before it's over.
I mean, it's fine. I'll talk about Josh. But yeah, so what I've told my subscribers from the jump is if you're in the top 75 with offense they have back, they should win 8-9 games, even with a very hard schedule. Okay.
Yep.
So that's a huge step up. With the linebacker play, that was a big Achilles heel for them last year. It was bad run fits, guys being out of position in the run, giving up chunk plays and things like that. Not maintaining their eye discipline, things like that. That was the first thing I noticed with Tyler Santucci when we were in for spring ball. They took like one snap on defense. They were playing 11 on 11, and he runs out. Trent Tatum took the wrong step to start the play. He just blew it dead, ran out, and was like, hey, blah, 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 and corrected him. And that attention to detail, that sort of coaching just wasn't there for those guys. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement, especially with those two linebackers. And then having guys like EJ Lightsey and Jackson Hamilton who've played a little bit or have experience. EJ hasn't played as much, but, really talented guy. And you can kind of push those guys, move them around a little bit. I think that that's going to make a huge difference. But I think to me, the big thing is if the defensive line can play as well as they project, that cleans up things. So they're going in and cleaning up instead of having to, overcome mistakes because, guys are getting to the second level to block them or whatever's going on. They should be able to occupy blockers. Zeke Biggers is a huge human being and is trimmed down. He's like 325 pounds. He came in at 360. He's like 6'6". He's a giant nose tackle. And so they have these big bodies that can occupy blockers. It's a matter of just keeping everything in front of them now and not giving up those junk plays. And that's what kind of killed Georgia Tech last year.
What is kind of a Santucci's philosophy, I guess, as opposed to what Georgia Tech did last year? Are they more attacking, more read and react, keeping the offensive linemen off the linebackers and safeties, letting them go make plays, or is it pretty much just a new personality reading a similar scheme?
So last year the defense was all about, we're going to make explosive plays. This was sort of the Andrew Thacker style, which is that Jeff Collins thing. That let's get sacks, strip the ball, get interceptions down the field, right? And so you would have guys do things like, they're going to tackle a guy after he maybe picks up a first down, and they're trying to strip the ball instead of making a nice tackle or at least slowing him down so they can gang tackle him and rally to the ball. Those things are, and Santucci's not about that. It's fundamental football. Like, hey, we'll be aggressive. Thing with Santucci too is they'll mix up fronts. They'll be different with what different personnel packages and things like that. They're not married to, hey, we got to play, these four guys up front, and this is now they'll go big, they'll size down, they'll put the two rush ins on the field, like they'll do lots of stuff like that, and so they'll be creative with that, but they're not going to be like, trying to strip the ball 20 yards downfield. And it worked in some cases. I mean, that's what happened at the end of that Miami game when they beat them. They went in and stripped the ball in a situation. They were very good at that, forcing fumbles and getting picks, but like they had a lot of fundamentally unsound plays because of some of that style of play. And so I think that's going to ratchet down, and hopefully they'll keep things in front of them a little bit more. That was the thing that killed them when they went down to Florida State 2 years ago, is they just gave up a couple of explosives early in the game and they were out of it. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, were you at the Miami Georgia Tech game last year?
I was. It is the funniest moment I've ever seen in a press box. Just about.
Yeah, I was baffled. I was sitting at home watching it, and still to this day. Now, you had a lot of Georgia Tech fans in Tallahassee that day. I can tell you that, and probably even more so after the game. But what did you think? Like, I'm sitting there watching the game with my father, who coached college football for 50 years, and both of us said at the same time, what what just happened, with the play call, why they run the ball. And we heard the Hasselback talking about it. We're all, so we're agreeing with Hasselback. What the hell are they doing? What the hell are they doing? And then, of course, it looks like a benign inside zone play. And the next thing you know, that ball's squirting out. And then, of course, Haynes King keeps a play alive to complete that game-winning pass. I mean, I've seen probably some crazy endings to a ball game, but I've never seen something quite like that, at least in recent memory.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was typing up my, losing story. And I'm looking up, and I said to our AJC route, Chad Bishop, who's sitting next to me, I was like, why are they running the ball? I was like, oh, I looked down at the stats. I was like, oh, they're trying to get this kid 100 yards rushing. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like, why would you do? And as soon as I said that, he fumbled the football, and they got the ball back. And then, like, there's just this loud, audible groan from all the Miami media in the press box. And then when Leary slipped past the defense and he threw that ball over the top of the defense and scored, you literally heard like people pounding like their desks and stuff. And I've seen wild stuff. I was at the game, the game that Florida State lost at Georgia Tech on the blocked field goal.
Oh, yeah, that was wild.
Which is something I never thought I'd see again. And that one was just like everyone stood up that was in the press box when it happened. Like literally everyone, all the Florida State, everyone just stood up and was like shocked. There was not, but and like there was some like audible, oh my god, like. But the Miami one was much funnier because they were so angry because in that situation, like what happened with Florida State, that is a plausible outcome that has happened before in games. It is not likely to happen, especially with that kicker. But like what happened at the end of the Miami game is completely implausible. And the guy's done it 3 times as the head coach, which is unbelievable to me. Like that's the part that, like, I got text from a buddy who worked at Florida and played at Stanford, and he was like, he sent me a text. He's like, this is the third time this guy did this. He did it against Stanford.
Yes.
And he was like telling me the whole story, like that night, like while I was driving back at 3 a.m. or whatever to my hotel room. Um, but yeah, so it was funny to me that this guy, and then I enjoyed the ultimate irony of Mario Cristobal was on the Dodd watch list. You know what the Dodd trophy is? It's Bobby Dodd taking a knee.
Yeah.
And I just thought about like the irony of him being on that like watch list before the season, and was like, this is the guy who doesn't believe in taking a knee, and it's cost him 3 wins in his career.
Oh, I just hope we don't find out somewhere down the line that the 100-yard thing was built into some kind of NIL deal, and that's why they were trying to do it. And like they have these performance enhancements in the contracts for pro players. I want it's silly enough that he did it, even if it was just out of a hey, we want to get this guy recognition for a 100-yard game. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know you were there. That's I mean, I think
still love the guy, the assistant, that's like screaming at them on the sideline when Hasselbeck's talking about what are they doing before the fumble. Is like, what do you take a knee? Take a knee. The guy's like screaming at them, like Shannon Dawson and Cristobal take a knee or whatever.
Yeah,
it is peak Miami for like the last 25 years or whatever. Like how they've managed to squander every opportunity they've had to be good.
Yeah. Well, that was a crazy game. All right, so let's get back to Georgia Tech.
I'm sure your fans are enjoying it. Like,
crapping on Miami. We got after Miami pretty good. We ranked the schedule last. The schedule 1 to 12. 1 being the toughest game, 12 being the easiest, and I said something about, well, I know it's going to be a close game, but if it comes down to a battle of wits between Norvell and Cristobal, it's a runaway with Norvell every time. But let's talk a little bit about that Georgia Tech offense, because that's where most of the buzz has been about. And of course, Haynes King signed with Texas A&M out of high school. Listen, I think nationally he broke onto the national scene with that performance in the second half against North Carolina. I think that's when everybody became aware of him, because I think he ran for over 200 yards and a half. When North Carolina decided to play tag football for whatever reason, they did something. Listen, 4 or 5 years ago, they played a 4-minute offense trying to behind by 2 scores against Florida State up in Chapel Hill. Mac does some bizarre things. But anyway, Haynes King, what makes him so special, and how do you think he ranks? This has kind of been called for about the second year in a row, the year of the quarterback in the ACC. There are a lot of potentially good quarterbacks. It seems like every university is selling their guy as the guy. But what makes Haynes King special and from your experience with him?
I think with Haynes, it's all about his ability to just will his team and have confidence. Like he said at the end of the game in Miami, he just told, hey, let's go do our thing, right? Like, let's not overthink this moment. And sometimes it gets him into trouble, like the interception thing. He had issues with turnovers. He was being aggressive and reading pre-snap reads and seeing things and forcing the football. But people got to remember, last year was his first year starting regularly. Yep. He had been a starter 2 years earlier at A&M and got hurt in the second game of the season or something like that. And then he played off and on his last year at A&M before he transferred. He got benched a couple of different times. It wasn't like DJU, right, who has all this experience as a starting quarterback. He didn't have any of that. So he was learning on the curve. They were learning what their offense was going to be. The staff kind of talked about, I think it was the North Carolina game they mentioned, is when they sort of figured out their identity as an offense, that this is what we are. We're going to run downhill and all that stuff. And so with Georgia Tech and Haynes King, it was figuring out what he is. And, the other thing too, man, is like they lost their the guys who were projected as their top 2 receivers played. Chase Lane got hurt in the second game of the season, was never the same. He came back and played a little bit. And then Leo Blackburn blew out his knee in fall camp. So they were down. Eric Singleton ended up being like a freshman All-American, all this stuff. But like they were down weapons before the season even started last year. Dante Smith, who was huge down the stretch for them, was like banged up before they went into the season. There was a lot of stuff going on. And they kind of found their footing as they were able to get going. The big thing I think with Haynes is his ability to stretch plays, like you talked about, when he wants to run the ball, especially in the second half of games. He likes getting downhill and kind of imposing his will, and he's been really good at that. And I think that gives him a dynamic weapon because he's not afraid of contact. He's not afraid to run between the tackles. and that's a little bit different than just a guy kind of rolling out and scrambling for 10 yards or whatever. He's trying to hit the Jets. And to be honest with you, last year he went into the season, he wasn't 100% in terms of, he had like a little bit of a foot issue. So really, it was the second half of the season, I think, when he was a little healthier over that was the big deal. But he won't tell you that because that's not the kind of guy he is. He wants people to not understand that part of it too. That it
Right.
was more than just his. It was more than just him clicking. There was a lot of different things to it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the downhill nature of the offense, and I did notice, as you're well aware, that they went heavy in the portal and tight ends and H-back type bodies. I've got about 8 different players, I guess, at that tight end / H-back position. I'm sure they use 2 at a time at times. They probably do a lot of 12. So, is it with that Haynes King breakout game against UNC? Have they gone full in on ground and pound? I mean, obviously they've got some talented receivers around him, and the kid can throw the ball. I mean, he threw for almost 3,000 yards last year. How do you see them, particularly in the game against Florida State, using Haynes in the run game? Do you expect they'll just be another game and Brent's going to do what the offense does? You think because it's Florida State and you've got what is supposed to be a really good defensive line group coming in for Florida State, particularly the starting group, will they be as aggressive with Haynes? Do you think they're going to just do what they do? Or you think he will, with Jamal Haynes and with the other kid in the backfield, you don't really have to, Haynes King doesn't have to shoulder the load with Jamal Haynes behind him. But obviously he's making a commitment to the run game with what they've done with tight ends and H-backs. How aggressive do you think they'll be with Haynes against Florida State?
So it's interesting because the guys they brought in, Jackson Hawes is a kid from Yale who's just incredibly talented. Like he's probably going to end up, I would think he'll end up being all ACC at tight end.
Which is funny because when I was doing the portal study on Georgia Tech, they had him ranked so low. I was like, well, this kid just wanted to graduate, get a master's from Georgia Tech. And then I read your comments and I was like, well, maybe he got just knocked down because he came from Yale.
It was more of that than anything else. He had other stuff going on. Like he's just a big dude who falls forward, great hands, tough guy. Josh Beathan, the kid from Michigan, they brought in is pretty good. They have Avery Boyd, they have Rhett Seither, they have different weapons. Luke Harpring's a kid they brought in as a true freshman that can catch the ball. His dad's Matt Harpring, former NBA player. Just kind of a freaky athlete like his dad. So they got dudes there. They can use them in different ways. The big thing with Tech is they're not going to line up in 12 all the time or whatever. They're going to have, they could go 22. They could go no tight ends. They play a lot of different ways. And they have enough receivers to go 4 or 5 deep there, maybe 6. They can play 2 running backs at a time. They do a lot of, they're very multiple. Buster's very big on that, he likes to give you different looks and then run, it might just run simple RPO out of it or whatever. But when you have all that stuff and you get teams spread out, they'll go empty. Like they do lots of stuff to kind of mess with the defense and create mismatches. And he'll just read what the defense is doing and then make a decision on that. And that's where that helmet comp thing, I think, is going to be huge for them too, because they can line up, look at it, and be like, all right, let's do this. Let's run a blast and have the QB just take off down the middle because we got everybody spread out or whatever it is. Like there's a lot of different pieces to their offense. And there was a lot of stuff they didn't do last year just because they were thin at receiver and at times. And they have, the big thing I will say is they have really insane speed at the receiver position right now.
So I was going to ask you, who are the playmakers? Who you think the playmakers are going to be at receiver?
You got Eric Singleton, who's maybe, I would say, in the argument for one of the fastest guys in the ACC, even though he's not in the NCAA football game, which has very much been a running joke around here. He's running track literally in the ACC and is one of the fastest guys in the ACC running track too. You got Eric, you have Malik Rutherford and Christian Leary, the guy who had the game-winning catch against Miami, who were all elite speed guys. Chase Lane's no slouch. They have a kid named Bailey Stockton, who's a redshirt freshman who didn't play last year that they're really excited about. They got good speed. And then you have guys like Jamal Haynes, Anthony Carey, the running back they just signed. That's a true freshman from Tampa. He's kind of a freak. And they got a lot of weapons, man. Like that's the biggest thing I noticed about this team maybe from a year ago is they have more weapons. And so I think that they're going to be very multiple on offense. I don't think you can plan on them just line up and smashing you and trying to play that way. They'll be different. I think Buster's a guy who kind of likes to explore that. In the second half of games, they tended to kind of figure out what was going to be maybe the bread and butter for that particular game, and then they'll lean on that and run the same plays over and over again and beat you with it.
Yeah. Riley, I think we just answered this question a couple of minutes ago. We both feel like 12.5 point spread might be a little aggressive. I'll let Kelly speak for himself, but I think that you would jump all over 12.5 with
Yeah.
Georgia Tech. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in these games, the first game of the season is always so weird for everybody, anyways. Then you're adding the element of playing in Ireland. It's going to be like 66 degrees, if not cooler, probably raining. Like, it is not like high scoring football weather. And if you look at the games traditionally there, they've not been like particular. They've been, every one of them's been like a touchdown or a last minute win or something like that. And so I think it's hard to do that. You're not talking. This is not like Alabama Vanderbilt or something being played in Ireland. This is two teams that are not that far apart. Like Florida State's ahead of Georgia Tech in terms of. I would say they have more like NFL type guys right now. They're probably more talented from like a pure talent standpoint, but the margin's not like huge. And because Tech has so much returning talent, that concerns me if I'm looking at this as a gambler and you're a Florida State fan, I'd be like, this is not a game I walk in feeling like, oh, they're just going to be up win by 3 scores or whatever. And that's the thing that I think would make you nervous gambling on the game.
Yeah, I would too. 12.5 is a lot of points in an
That's a
opener,
lot.
especially.
That's a lot in the NFL, man.
Yeah.
Like, or like in a college game, like in a league game overseas, guys jet lagged. Like, I mean, if you're not used to it, it takes time. I've been there. I went in 2016. It is like I said is the weirdest other than those games during COVID when like I went to Boston College and there were 21 people in the stadium for a game. Other than that, it is the weirdest environment I've like been to for a game in terms of just being totally different.
All right. Well, how much better do you think Georgia Tech is this year than they were last year? And how do you, I mean, obviously we look at things on paper and we know games not played on paper. There's going to be strange stuff that happens, and you're going to have a game where you're not up when you should be. And, you're going to get, that's just the nature of the beast. I personally think it's going to be a strange year in the ACC. I think there's going to be some surprises, good and bad this year. I think that it's a little, I don't think it's just Florida State and Clemson this year, which is most years it has been, especially recently. But, one of the things that I think is neat about being around the program, and Jerry, who's going to join me, can verify later. He can verify this when he comes on the show. We got a chance to be around the team, and it's not just what you see in practice; it's how you see the kids interact with the staff and see how the kids interact with each other and the energy of the team, and I guess some intangible type stuff. And in 2022, we walked out of that camp saying, "All right, Mike's fixing to turn the corner with this program. We're fixing to see it's just the way we felt about the team, not only from what our eyes saw, but just the sense that you got from being around the team." And of course, now I've been around teams my whole life, and some are tighter than others, and you pick up on that. So how much better do you think Georgia Tech will be than they were last year? And are there any intangibles like that or things that you get a sense of being around the team that have changed over the last couple of years?
They have a real quiet confidence about them, and they reflect Brent Key. Brent Key's a tough dude. He's not afraid. They played Georgia toe for toe at the end of last season. That was an 8 point game.
Yep.
They played Ole Miss okay for like half of a game up there, and Ole Miss early in the season before they knew what they were doing on offense really and had some identity. Um, I just this is a team that like they're like Brent Key. Brent Key's a guy who shouldn't be a head coach, right? Like on paper. He's not a successful offensive coordinator. Had one bad season where everyone got fired when he was the OC at UCF. Um, he's just a guy who, if he wasn't a Georgia Tech alum and didn't get to be the interim head coach, would never be the head coach, right? Like, so he approaches this like as I'm going to do everything I can to win, and I believe we can win every game. And that was how he was successful as interim coach. His first game, they had no business winning. I think it was at Pitt, and they were totally overmatched in that game and somehow won. So I think that they're closing the talent gap, which has been the biggest issue. They're getting more talent. Their offensive line's one of the best in the ACC right now. The defensive line got much better. That's where you win games in the trenches. And I think that confidence from that stuff kind of trickles down through the whole program. And having Haynes King, a guy who's had these miraculous, comeback wins and huge games and stuff, gives him a lot of confidence too. And I think that the whole program kind of feeds on that. And that's where it gets into your culture and believing in each other. And they're not playing for money. They're not playing for, fame or whatever. They're playing for each other. And I think that makes them such a different team than a lot of other programs. And that's the thing that Brent, he worked for Nick Saban and O'Leary and all these people and trying to build the culture that he wants. He talks to Bill Belichick, all these different people he has connections with to try to figure out what it is that he needs to do to make his team successful. And I think that they're on the right track. I don't think they're there yet. This schedule is very hard. Next year they have an easier schedule. But I think this is a team that can compete in the ACC. And, if they beat Florida State, I think that puts them in a position to compete for a trip to Charlotte. Like, I think they'll be in good spot then.
All right. So as a fall camp has progressed, do you feel better about their chances against Florida State or worse about their chances against Florida State?
I feel better about it. I'm not a big DJU guy. Like, I think he is a very serviceable quarterback. Like, I think he's okay. He's not going to lose a game for you. But I just have never seen him be like the guy that goes and wins games. And I watched a bunch of those Oregon State games because I would come back to the hotel on the road or whatever, and they'd be on at night or Friday night or whatever too. And I just was never like super impressed with him. Like Jordan Travis had that X factor to him, even when he was younger.
Had the ed factor, which it sounds like Haynes King has got.
Yeah, and those guys, to me, yes, they're going to have a game where they throw 4 picks or something like that. I mean, I watched Jordan Travis throw the worst interception I've ever seen in my life in a game, like in an end zone, maybe 2 years ago.
And he probably followed it up with some unbelievable play the next year.
Yeah, and like like to lose a game and then like do amazing things, right? So like maybe it was his first year at Florida State, I can't remember, but like like those moments, those guys are going to have the gambler guys who are kind of leaders. I just think DJU's a nice piece on a good team. Like, is that going to be enough to carry them? And can Haynes King will his team to win? If I'm betting on those two, I'm going to bet on Haynes King, right? Like, and so to me, that's what this comes down to. Do I think Georgia Tech wins? I don't know. I think it'll be a close game in the fourth quarter, and I think whoever's playing better will. I think the two X factors are kind of the weirdness of like Ireland and who adjusts to it the fastest. And I think Georgia Tech's offensive line against Clemson, against Florida State's defensive line will be the big determining factor, right?
Yep.
Because if they can block them and execute some offense and just move the football around, right, and keep the defense off the field at time for some time, I think they're in the game. I think that the defense will be good enough to hold them. This is not the defense they played 2 years ago that was giving up tons of 50-yard plays or whatever. It's not that, and you don't have a quarterback that's traditionally known for doing that. This is a Florida State team to me that's going to be much more heavy on the run and using play action passing versus the stuff they did the last few years with Jordan Travis.
Yep, I agree with that. And we talked a little bit yesterday about the schedule, and I've got this inside a touchdown game for sure. I don't think it's 12.5. I think that, I think Georgia Tech's trending in the right direction. Florida State obviously is going to be a very solid football team, but I don't think we know quite what they got on offense yet, what their offensive identity is. I think Florida State's going to be very good on defense. Obviously, I think Georgia Tech's probably going to be really good on offense. I think the question mark for them is the opposite side of the ball. It's the defense. But I agree with you. I think the battle between both lines, on both sides, I think it's going to be decided inside because I think both teams would like to run the ball. I think I do think that's what Brent wants to do. And obviously, when you got a dual threat quarterback, is like you guys, Haynes King, I think it helps, but because brings more variables into your offense. But I do think at the end of the day, this game's going to be decided on the line. And I thought you might make a prediction, but I'm fine without it because I'm not ready to make mine on.
I don't know what to think, man. It's hard. Like, think about like the LSU Florida State game or whatever.
Yep.
Like, these games are so hard to handicap. Georgia Tech was beating the tar out of Louisville in the season opener and then blew it in the second half, like last year. And Louisville ended up, kind of marching through a weak schedule through the ACC, right? These games are just weird. Like the first season, like the season opener, so many of them have been so bizarre over the years that I remember a bad Georgia Tech team almost beating Clemson in the Benz. Like they were bad that year and almost beat them until Charlie Thomas, their star linebacker, got ejected for kind of a lame targeting call in the third quarter, and that turned that whole game around. But like just stuff like that, man. Like you could have a guy get hurt or someone get ejected for targeting or whatever. Those things can turn you so early in the season when you don't have experience or guys used to playing with each other.
Yeah, I was hoping they were going to modify the targeting rule somehow this offseason, but of course they didn't.
No,
It's crazy. They need to. Either that
you
or
watch an old tape, man. Like you put on tape from like the NFL from the '80s.
oh,
It's like watching people like play rugby or something, man. Like
we're talking about how different inside drill is done in college football compared to the way it
Oklahoma,
was.
all those things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like inside drill is not inside drill anymore. It's hard to determine who does what. But yeah, well, listen, I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I agree with you. I think it's going to be close. I don't think either one of these two teams know exactly who they are yet. And listen, and again, we say this all the time on our other podcasts. I don't, because you don't get to see these teams scrimmage, at least not here. You don't really know how to carry over what you see in practice, right? So the first time either one of us will get a chance to see everything verified or validated will be next Saturday. But it is going to be an awesome game, I think. I'm glad it's here. Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse to death because we've talked about it ad nauseum on our boards. But just your take on Josh Petty, because a week and a half out from his commitment, I thought he was a lock for Florida State. I know there was some conjecture even as early as ACC media days that the flip was on, that he was going to go to Georgia Tech. Then you hear about all these wild amounts of money. I don't know what the hell to believe on that. I believe one of the numbers I've heard is true. I don't believe all of them are true. But were you surprised? Because my understanding is a week and a half out, he was for Florida State all the way.
So it's funny because like I heard the exact opposite. It was probably 3 weeks ago that they kind of pulled ahead. Georgia Tech pulled ahead. And I'd been hearing all this stuff, talking to all my sources, working them, trying to find out what was going on. Florida State and Georgia Tech definitely to get into a little bit of an NIL betting war, I think. Now, Florida State is the one that drove the price up. Georgia, he got from the person who would know about this a hometown discount. Georgia Tech got. They did not pay anywhere. They did not pay that number that's being floated out.
No,
And he took less from them than what Florida State was offering him because he wanted to be in Atlanta. Now, if you talk to Josh Petty and you spend time with him, I went up there and spent like a day with him on his commitment day. He is a Georgia Tech type kid personality. And the funny thing, I remember I told you guys this, when he went down there, he gave y'all the 40-year decision quote, right? Like, and that's straight from Brent Key. That is a Brent Keyism. And when Brent Key heard him say that, he told people that that's the moment they thought they had him locked up because he was parroting Georgia Tech's recruiting pitch back to the Florida State people. They just weren't picking up on it.
Yeah. Well,
but ultimately, man, like kids want to stay close to home sometimes, and it made sense for him. And we'll see what happens.
You think it's done? You think it's done? You think it's done through December 4th?
Yeah, that kid's not the type of personality to play games with his recruitment. He's very into being very true to like his decision. That's why he took so long with it too. I think he just wanted to be absolutely sure.
I read the article that you wrote, I guess, about 4 days out. And it was, I put in our board, I said, based on what he said, he's made his decision. I'm just not ready to give up on Florida State yet. And of course, that just happened that week of practice. Derek Ray was on his phone the day he was about to commit. Of course, he was being kind of facetious. Well, Derek's probably trying to figure out how they get Josh to Florida State. And, because I look at these things anymore as more negotiations than recruitments. It's changing with the NIL. But anyway, listen, I think the kid's got a really high upside, and Florida State's gonna have to face him at some point. But it was interesting because boy, I had my future cast in for Florida State, and 2 weeks out, I was hearing from somebody I trust that's close that, hey, he's leaning to us. He's leaning to us. And then, of course, the next weekend it was different. All right, Kelly. Well, I know you're packing to go. I know you're packing to go to the Swiss Alps before you head to Ireland. But we appreciate you joining us always. It was good seeing you in Jacksonville and Atlanta and various other places. And we will. I think that Jerry may be in touch with you once y'all both get out to Ireland. I'll let you know about that. But thanks for dropping in. Thanks for answering my questions, the viewers' questions, and Jerry and Kurt. We'll see you in Ireland, and we'll see you next time we see each other on the recruiting trail.
Sounds good, my friend.
All right, Kelly. Thanks, man. Appreciate it a bunch. All right, we're going to go to a little commercial break and hear from our sponsors. Then Jerry Cutts is going to join me so that we can talk a little bit about Florida State's operational policies, not policies really, how they're taking their entire office, train room, weight room, coaches' offices to Ireland, and we'll be right back in about 51 seconds. Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it, bud.
No problem. Thank you.
Hey, Seminole fans. Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
All right, we're back with Seminole Sidelines, and I am joined now by Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts. Jerry, what's happening, man? You got a lot longer Georgia Tech preview than you anticipated, I'm sure.
That was great, though. He's got me worried.
Well, I was already worried before he came on. So. But hey, all right. So let's get it. Let's talk a little bit about practice 18 right now. We did see Florida State practice. It is the last time we will see them before next week. They are doing a mock game tomorrow. Then I think they've got kind of a walkthrough on Saturday. Then Mike Norvell will have lunch with the media on Sunday and do a season opening press conference. And we will see them on. Well, you won't. You'll be heading to Ireland on Sunday, but we will see the team as the Osceola on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But listen, today's practice, I thought it was pretty good. Mike deemed it as a Wednesday in-week practice, meaning that this will be the practice formula for Wednesdays in the season. They were in full pads. I really thought that the offense came out sharp, particularly in the 2-minute drill, where DJU completed, I think, two of his four passes, one for about 30 yards, one for about 10 yards to get down to set up a field goal in the 2-minute drill. Listen, it'd been a while since we'd seen some successful passes back-to-back downfield. I thought that was good. Brock did the same thing. He had two of his 6 passes in the second 2-minute drill, and both set up what would have been game-winning field goals in this scenario. And then the defense responded well in the team period outside in period 9, where they went 1st and 10, it looked like to me. That was about the only team we saw, because the rest of it was scout team stuff, because they're definitely in preparation for Georgia Tech. But what were just your overall thoughts on what you saw at practice today?
Yeah, I did think they executed better against the scout team for sure. Scout team was running Georgia Tech, what Florida State expects to get out of Georgia Tech looks. And, they had more success against that than they've had against the number one defense. Well, for sure.
Well, the 2-minute period and the going out team period 9, those were both good on good. Did you get anything out of those particular periods?
Yeah, Florida State's offense had a good day. I thought. I did think it was better than other days they've had.
Yeah. And now, listen, we heard Mike after the press conference. His quote was a really good practice, really good Wednesday practice. Specifically, Jerry, it's something we've talked about just about every day. The wide receiver group, who's going to be the playmaker, who are the three guys that are going to earn the starting positions. But he said that he thought the wide receivers had, his words were, stepped up their game, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then he talked specifically in order about Malik Benson, Darian Williamson, Kentron Portier, and then Ja'Kai Douglas, and then down the road mentioned something about Lawrence McCoy. Listen, we did see Ja'Kai have a little bit better week. I think Malik flashed one time. I think he had a catch today that caught my eye. Do you agree with Mike that this group has continued to evolve as we've gone through this third week of training camp?
Yeah, I thought they were better today and yesterday. The receivers were. They were more consistent. I agree that Douglas is one of your more consistent receivers. And this past week, we've had Portier and Williamson both healthy. So those guys have experience. And, we talked about it going into this fall, that if those guys could stay healthy, they're dangerous receivers. And so right now they're healthy, and that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I hope Mike would know better than we would. He sees the film, and that is what needed to happen with this football team. And listen, we won't, again, like I just told Kelly, none of what we think is going to be validated until next Saturday, one way or the other. So, but it was good to hear Mike talk about that. We also got a chance to talk to Cam Riley after practice. Jerry, you don't ever, we think about these players, whether they produce or don't produce, and whether Cam Riley fit what Florida State does on defense, where they fit what they did at Auburn. And then you listen to him talk, and a guy that's now in his fourth defensive coordinator in 4 years in college football. He felt like he talked a little bit about the fact that he's surrounded by playmakers in the Florida State system because of the way it plays its front, which in a lot of aspects I always call it a modified heavy technique, which is not really two gapping, but it is. But and what he was talking about, the thing he loves about the Florida State defense is that he gets to play more freely in this defense than any defense that is set up for him to make tackles behind the line of scrimmage or near the line of scrimmage. And the biggest thing for him is not what they're doing style-wise, schematically. It's he's had to learn a new verbiage for the fourth straight year, and that when Adam gives him a word or a call, and he has to kind of decipher it by saying, all right, well, when what we're calling orange at Florida State was what we called purple at Auburn, type of thing, if that makes sense to you. But, he seems really excited for the season, and I think he's been one of the surprises at camp because he was such a late addition. But what are your thoughts on Cam as we head into the game week?
Well, the fact they're putting the dot on his helmet tells you something. Lundy will be on the headset, helmet to coach communication, but they also have it on Cam. So that tells me that tells me Fuller has some confidence in Riley. And you can tell, Pat, from that interview, we had a chance to interview him when he was a newcomer, and you can tell he's mature. He's got a lot of experience in football. And he just seems like he's going to be a real solid addition to the defense.
Yeah, I was surprised that he's been as good as he is, just because you didn't know how he was going to fit, right? We thought he was 6'5" coming in. He's not really 6'5", but he's a big old tall kid. There's no doubt about that. But he has fit in well. He runs particularly well. I really like him and Blake playing next to DJ, and I can't wait to see what those guys do. And I think Florida State's going to be aggressive on defense. That's kind of where they started playing better last year, when they started bringing pressure from the second level. And obviously we feel like the defensive front's going to be pretty good. I noticed today, you and I have talked about it before, and you and I is we've by default, because of where we position ourselves at practice, have spent more time around probably the defensive front, watching them go through individual drills in the IPF. And, I just made a note to myself. I don't make a lot of notes on individual drills. I make a lot more notes about what happens in teams or pass pro period or inside or half line when it's going offense is going against defense. But I continue to be impressed with Tommy George and KJ Sampson. Watching those guys go through the bags today, Jerry, they're heavy-handed. They work extremely hard. Both of them have high motors. And as we were talking yesterday, kind of about not knowing, who the depth pieces were. And I had a conversation with somebody that was at practice here as an analyst, not with the FSU or the Osceola, and they were talking about, well, I don't know who the next guys are up on Florida State's front. And so I started trying to pay a little bit more attention after that conversation than I did today. And I continue to get fired up about those guys. Just your thoughts on KJ and Tommy, what you've seen from them the last couple of days.
Yeah, both of them have impressed me. I went into camp not really certain. I think you might have been higher on KJ than I was. But I'm very I like him. And then Pat, what's the other defensive tackle that played a couple years ago and then last year didn't play a lot? 95.
Daniel Lyons.
Yeah, Daniel Lyons is a pretty good player too now.
Yep.
So I think there's depth. It'll be interesting to see how Brent Key attacks this front because being the offensive line coach that he is, I think he's probably going to scheme it up some.
Well, I think I was thinking about that the other day. It's funny that you mentioned that. I was just thinking about it randomly, not talking to anybody, just thinking about the game. And listen, I think your biggest concerns are probably right there in front of your quarterback, right in front of your center, and Darrell Jackson and Josh Farmer. And what's the best way to get those guys off the field? Gas them. So I think you'll see Georgia Tech try to hit the perimeter, keep those guys running, get those guys gassed is what I would think they would do. Now, it depends on how confident he is in his offensive line, right? Like we just heard Kelly talk about, he thinks this is one of the best offensive lines in the ACC going against one of the best defensive lines in the ACC. So they may feel like they can go mano a mano against Florida State's defensive line. But just my first thought was, how do you get Darrell Jackson and Josh Farmer off the field? And the only way to do that is to gas them. And how you got to do that? You got to make them run. You got to make them chase the ball. So I think they're going to attack the perimeters of the defense. I think they'll try to run the ball at Patrick Payton and at Marvin Jones Jr. and those defensive ends. I think they'll try to run off tackle a lot. I also think they'll use some, as Mike will do too. I think you'll see a lot of play action. But I do think it's going to be fascinating to see how they attack Florida State. Listen, you look at it, and do you attack the side of the ball where Fentrell's lined up at corner? Would have to have some run support and attack that defensive end. But normally he's going to be lined up to the boundary, we think. Or do you attack the wide side of the field where they got to cover more ground? But I think that, listen, if I'm game planning for Florida State, the first guy I'm looking at is number 6, and I want to limit his reps. And you can't limit. You're not going to be able to run right at him if he doesn't want you to. And you got to get him off the field. So I think they'll try to run to the edges, and we'll get a good opportunity to see how good those defensive ends are against the run this year. Jared Verse was very good against the run. Peyton made a ton of plays. He's a very disruptive player, but it's a little bit different chasing the ball than having the ball come at you. So I think if you had to ask me offhand, and I'm going to go back and start my Georgia Tech study from last year to see where they ran the ball, but I would expect that they will try to get the ball to the edge and run those guys. All right, Jerry. So that's we did, like I said, it was heavy scout team practice. But the reason another reason we brought you on today is because you're going to Ireland, and you spent a good amount of time the last couple of weeks talking to Bruce Warwick and Jeff Cupper and others involved in the monumental task. I have a small appreciation for what they're doing. When I was at USF, we used to take our office from Tampa to Dodgertown for a week of preseason camp when Skip Holtz was the head coach, and I was working for him. That is still a very small job to do compared to taking the team to Ireland. And so just what did you learn? I know this goes all the way back to when the game was announced, starting to get guys passports, which, when we played in the Toronto Bowl at USF, we got put to the front of the line because a lot of our kids did not have passports, and the government made sure we got it done. But so it starts back when this game was announced, when they had the press conference. So just kind of walk us through your discussions with the FSU administration and support staff and all that's gone on to try to get this team over to Dublin, Ireland. It really started yesterday because the first 18-wheeler left.
Yeah. Well, it did start a long time ago, and the time is on their side. So the biggest challenge, the one you worry about would be the passports and in a couple of cases, visas, because we have a couple of international students on the team. So they got the student services department handled that. And Bruce said that for the most part, it went really smoothly. The players were, to me, it would be like herding cats. But he said they were very responsible about getting it done. Most of them had never been overseas, so they had to get a passport for them. It began there. I thought the other thing that was significant is this is an ACC game. And if you want to get to the ACC championship, which is, critical for the playoffs, this is a game you need to win. So while the fans can be excited about going to Ireland, the team has to take it like an important road game, which it is. And, so they're trying to make it look like just any other road game, but with a longer flight. And so the nutrition staff went over there, met with the hotel chef, and tried to come up with a menu that would taste the same and feel the same when you ate it as what the players are used to. They're going to run their practice schedule exactly the same way that they do on an away game. And for the most part, they're going to they're trying to Americanize it until after the game is played. And then on Sunday, that's when they'll, let them enjoy an Irish experience. But to me, I thought that was the most significant thing they're trying to do is make them feel at home. Don't change their routine. So I think that's important. I was surprised they're taking everybody. There was a time when you had a 70-man travel roster, and I thought that's probably what they would do in this case. But they're taking all of them, including walk-ons.
Well, I think that's pretty neat because you're right. They could have saved a ton of money on a very expensive trip by leaving 50 guys at home. And I think that's big. And I don't know whose decision. I'm assuming it was the two Mikes making that decision, Alford and Norvell. And I think that's putting the kids' experience and providing something for them that they may not get to see again, whether they're a walk-on or a scholarship player. So I think that's pretty cool, actually.
They're also taking all the staff. So, again, it's not a skeleton crew going over there. They're taking everybody that they can take. And if you're working, doing something around the staff, you're on the plane. As a consequence, the plane will be strictly team and staff. The president's party, the board of trustees, everybody else, they'll be going separately. The marching chiefs and the cheer squad will go separately. So those are, some of the logistics. Warwick had to, all he has to do is address the team travel. The president's office is handling the president and board of trustees, and the marching chiefs are handling their own travel.
Yeah, the strange thing then reading your article, which is at theosceola.com, and if you're a Florida State fan, you really do need to go read this article because they are leaving on Wednesday, August 21st, wheels up at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and they're going to try to get their players sleep on the plane because they're going to land at 10 a.m. Ireland Standard Time on Thursday morning. So they will have basically, as Bruce says in the article, going to try to keep the kids awake once they get there to get them in on a schedule, right? And they say they say you should never chase sleep, and so they're trying to make sure that the players don't chase sleep. But it is weird because, and he went into in depth about his NFL experience in the article, talking about how teams in the NFL would fly out a week early, and I guess the team he was with didn't have a lot of success when they flew out 5 days early.
The Rams, they lost all 4 games, and then they went to this other method. And not only did Bruce have all this experience with the Rams, but the team doctor, he had 20 seasons in the NFL, 14 of them, 14 international trips. So they've got some science behind there's some method to the madness.
Yep.
So that's what they'll do is they'll practice Wednesday, wear them out Wednesday between, they get them up at 6 a.m. and they keep them busy until 9 p.m. all through this camp. And so when those players get in that plane at whatever time of evening it is, they're going to be tired. And with the use of melatonin, or natural stuff and relaxation techniques, they think they can get them, 5 or 6 good hours of sleep, which is probably a lot for those kids. That's probably their normal. If you're up till 9 p.m. in staff meeting, and then have to be back up at 6 the next morning, you're probably not getting more than 6 hours of sleep as it is.
Yeah, well, another thing is, listen, these kids will have been through about 24, 25 practices by the time they get on that plane in about 30 days. I'm sure they will find rest where they can get it, and just having the ability to relax and not have to worry about anything for about 8 hours. I believe that's about the time, maybe 11 hours, the time of the flight. But yeah, so you're going on Sunday. How excited are you for this trip?
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to Ireland, and my wife and I are going to go together, and we're going to take a couple of days and go see Galway, and then be back in Dublin on we'll be there first thing Thursday morning. And so Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Dublin, we'll fly back on Sunday.
Have you got any watering holes or restaurants that have been recommended to you yet that you want to share with the people?
Well, the Temple Bar area is apparently the place to be. There's a huge agenda that FSU's got going on, and we'll write something up about all the things going on. I see the Alumni Association's got an event going. Cole Hain has an event going. There's a pep rally on Friday. Our friends at War Chant have got some activities planned. Jeff Cameron Show will be coming from Ireland. So there's a lot going on, and I'll do a fan story about that. If you're in Tallahassee, the Osceola will have a game watching party at Glory Days. We'll start promoting that today. But if you're in the Tallahassee area, doors open at Glory Days at 11 o'clock, and we'll have they'll have some specials and some free giveaways, as will the Osceola. We'll be giving away some T-shirts, but there'll be if you're in the Tallahassee area, be thinking Glory Days for game day.
Yeah, well, isn't it fun that we're talking about game day, because it seems I know this last 30 days has gone by quick, but it's been fun the last couple of days to see the scout team guys come out and start preparing for an opponent after all the talk for the last 9 months about this upcoming season. And I think it's going to be a heck of a experience for you and Kurt and the rest of the FSU fans that are out there. And we'll look forward to following you guys over here as we stay on this side of the pond. And we'll be doing
podcasts, throughout that week with updates from Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll still have our Seminole sideline scheduled next week. We'll do 6 p.m. We'll have a staff roundtable on our projections on the team, projections on the season. We'll go to a comprehensive season preview. We've already done the schedule preview. We're probably not going to pick winners for each and every game, but we're going to talk about the high points of camp and some questions we have coming out of camp. And then we'll may do a special podcast or two with Jerry and Kurt once they get out there. So you could see a Tuesday podcast pop up, but we also do a live 3 p.m. podcast on Wednesday and Thursday. I hope to have either Jerry or Kurt or both on with us for parts of those shows, and you can join us right here at the Osceola YouTube. And then on Saturday, we will have our post-game show. If we can do it logistically, it's going to be me, Jerry, and former FSU offensive lineman Mark Salva, along with former FSU senior defensive analyst Shane Burnham, who is my brother and used to coach at Rutgers, UCF, Iowa State, Richmond, Elon, over 25 years of coaching experience. He's going to join us this year as a guest college football analyst. So we will break down that game thoroughly, particularly with Mark and Shane. And hopefully those two will be able to join us on most post games. So definitely sign up to follow the Osceola on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button so you get updates on when we're doing this. Hit the notification button after you subscribe so that you get notifications of when we're going to do live or tape shows. And then, of course, go to theosceola.com to check out all our content. We got video highlights, photo galleries, and practice reports from the day. We take a look at the Rivals Top 250 and where FSU's commits fell in the updated rankings on Tuesday. Tramel Jones made a huge jump, 55 spots. He's now the 35th best overall player in the nation, according to Rivals rankings. And then, of course, Jerry's got his story with Bruce Warwick, which is fascinating. And I don't think you can ever really explain it enough, the totality of what that entails. But I remember talking to Jeff Cupper in the spring about when he was going over, and he said something about, well, we're going to have to take a certain type of salad dressing because it tastes different in Ireland than it does the United States. So there's a lot of little things that are going on this trip.
They definitely gave up the thought of grits.
Yeah.
They don't even know what a grit is in Ireland.
They probably don't even know what sausage gravy is over there either. Yeah. But that's all right. But listen, it's going to be a heck of a week. It's been a heck of a camp. We hope you've enjoyed our coverage on Seminole sidelines and, of course, our immediate reaction on first impressions. We will not see the team again in person until Monday, but we will have practice reports Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. So we'll have first impressions then. And like Jerry just said, he and Kurt will be on the other side of the pond to provide, I think I can talk, in Ireland coverage of what's going on out there. But thanks for joining us, and we will see you next Monday on our next edition of Seminole Sidelines. Have a great day.